Well, I want to start by saying thank you all for coming and thank you all for being here. It's interesting, like I look from left to right and I see so many friends and friendly faces through this fellowship. So we're basically just going to read to the wives front to back. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of like my backstory. I grew up in Indiana. I had two parents who were married. They're still married to this day. I have a sister. She's about 4.5, 5 years older than I am. And we kind of grew up in like a suburb, like suburban town. It was kind of like more heavily influenced by Chicago than it was Indiana, like all the way northwest. Growing up, like it was just weird. I mean, I always felt that I couldn't like interface with the world like the same way that people were interfacing with it. Just felt like I was always like a half step off, like a second off the clock, like something like that. And I can never really put my finger on it. It was just the strangest feeling, but I definitely realized that, I was interfacing a little bit differently. So that kind of, went through my entire life. So, talking about being restless, like that was the feeling that I felt my entire life. I was always restless. I was always discontented. I wanted to be, just like how kind of normal people were, how normal people could interface with the world. And, anxiety and restlessness just totally came with that the whole step of the way. Kind of went through grade school, like wondering, why all this was happening, like why I wasn't good at anything. There was just like some sort of craving for something that I haven't experienced yet. It would be like when I was in middle school, when I was about 12 or 13, that I first got exposed to substances. I ended up getting high with my sister actually, and I don't remember whether like I felt better or worse really from it. I think just the whole experience was kind of really overwhelming, like in general. So, but I do remember that like, because I was like pretty young, that I just felt the feeling that I was doing something wrong. But it would come in high school that I started doing this stuff more recreationally with like a more mature mind. And, I started finding that this stuff, that these drugs and alcohol, like this is the solution, to this restless, irritable, and discontented nature. This actually helps me interface with the world in a way that makes sense to me. This makes me feel all of those things that I felt like I was missing out on. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, once I got into college, I was fully like ripping and raging. I mean, I was smoking weed every day. I was drinking, 4 or 5 times a day. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is just like the college experience. But I didn't know that this is a really big precursor to alcoholism and to drug addiction. It really started spiraling in college for me is when I started experiencing like harder substances. Is when I really started kind of thinking to myself, like, okay, like, is what I'm doing right? Like, is what I'm doing fine? I mean, it was the answer for me there, but I could tell like something was kind of brewing there. When I graduated, I got a job up in Chicago and I was trading bonds. And really like, you've got to be like mentally sharp to be able to do that stuff. But like, I'm just running amok all over Chicago, like, going bar to bar, music festival to music festival, club to club, and like this stuff was normal to me. Like by this point, like the actual guy from Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, he said he was under this delusion where like he was walking around like Manhattan and stuff like that, and he would say like everyone else had to be on something. Because that's how normalized like it came to him, and that's how normalized it came to me. I'm like, yeah, like how are people not shutting the club down at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., going to like after party from there? Like, how are people getting through the day without this stuff? Like, those people, in my mind, didn't exist, truthfully. Like, it became that normal. And, I ended up moving back to Indiana from Chicago, and I moved into this beach town that was really a huge party town. Like, that's what it was. It was a huge party town. And I just went off the chart from that point. Because up until this point, things were manageable. I didn't really experience any sort of life consequences. Like, I graduated from college. I was paying my bills. I, bought a car. And here I move into this beach town, and I move into this beach house right on Lake Michigan, and, everything's fine. I'm not having any sort of financial consequences, no legal consequences, no spiritual consequences at the time. And I just go off to the races. So I'm drinking every day. You know, I get introduced to cocaine, and that was like the answer to all my problems. Yeah. And I started doing it like, you know, once every other weekend. Then it started moving on to like an every week type of thing, every weekend. And then we started getting into like 4 or 5 times a week. And I'm working as a private client banker at Chase. And like COVID was great because no one could see how messed up I was with the masks and everything. It was wonderful in that regard. But like I would go to work not even sleeping. I would go to work, you know, still very much like hungover. And I'm like, how did they not know that I'm like this fucked up? You know? And it really, like, I had about year 3 through 5, I had a big complication with that job. And I can give you a bunch of plausible reasons like why that happened. I can give you the reason of like, oh, we switched to this new software. We switched to, you know, different rules. Like I was tired from COVID. All of these things sound plausibly true. But the real reason is my drug and alcohol use messed with my mind so much that my job became impossible. It became entirely unmanageable. So I rage quit my job and ended up in a psych ward somehow. So I don't know. I guess Indiana has this version of Baker acting or something like that. But ended up there, and I, you know, like I was there, and it was funny on the intake. Some voice came over the wall, and they're like, "They can only hold you for 72 hours." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And like this person walked me through like how to get this paperwork, you know, set up and whatever. And, you know, so I know this is crazy. So I go through, you know, I go through intake and all that jazz. And I finally sit with someone after about like a day. And and my mind, like, while I'm in this place is like, all right, I'm going to get out of here as fast as I can. I'm definitely going to get some nitrous. I'm going to like, to ease my suffering from this, you know, process. And I talk to this person and she asked me like the $1 million question. This shit was great. And like, it was like the spotlight was coming down, the room is darkened, and she asked me, she's like, "Tim, are you going to stop or are you going to slow down?" And this was like really my moment here. And this was my moment to do the right thing. So naturally I told her that I was going to slow down. And she was just kind of looked at me and like rolled her eyes and was like, "All right, go to these groups and whatever." And, you know, I was just kind of doing puzzles and shit and like, you know, in the common area. And finally they're like, "All right, you can go." And my sister picked me up. She was about an hour late, and I have a resentment for that because I'm in this psych ward that like, why isn't she on time to pick me up from this psych ward, from this, you know, mental state, that this hard time that I'm going through? Why isn't she there? You know? But thankfully she came and got me. And, you know, she was just kind of like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not sure." So, you know, I'm like, "I'm not sure, but we'll do some booze or we'll drink some booze and do some cocaine about it and figure out why." And this just persisted. I mean, I had these strong resentments, you know, for like the people that put me into that situation, that the people that were responsible for putting me into the psych ward. I had a very big resentment about with them for a very long time about that. I was resentful for my sister because, again, like, why was she an hour late to come pick me up? Like, why wasn't she there? Why didn't she get me out of this situation? I was resentful to my work because if they would have just, you know, not purchased this $1 billion software, you know, that probably makes their business run a lot smoother, like, then, you know, I wouldn't be in this situation. And I was resentful to myself. Because I'm like, how did this even happen? By every sense of the word, like, I had psychotic thinking, like insane thinking at that time. And I really had no idea what to do at that point. I just locked myself kind of in my room. I went on the run of a lifetime. And, you know, from there, I moved in with a friend and kind of started working this factory job. And started kind of piecing my life together a little bit, gave up cocaine, was still doing a shit ton of nitrous, and was definitely doing kratom too. And I was working this factory job, and I was good at it. It made me feel really, really good, you know, just kind of like doing it. And so I got into a relationship, and this is actually like this is a big part of like my misconduct, right? So like I think that what is going to pull me out of this like psychotic state is by dating someone. So I start dating someone who sells cocaine and sells ecstasy and has 3 kids. Yeah. And my misconduct, my diseased thinking takes me into that situation thinking like, all right, you know what? We're going to go in there. We're going to stop doing that. We're going to clean house. We're going to clean house. We're going to get everything going on like this well-oiled machine. And, only when the kids are gone, we're going to start using and stuff. But that's not what happened. So I kind of had this weird, I don't know if it was a moment of clarity because I didn't really have many of those back then. But it was just something where I felt the need to cut this relationship off. And then again went into this psychotic thinking, oh my gosh, she used me, all sorts of stuff that, really like just to cover up my misconduct in it. And I decided, you know what is absolutely going to help me at this time and what is going to fix everything is moving to Florida. But what I did not understand at that time is that I take me wherever I go. And I took me to Florida. When I got down here, I think medical professionals would have considered me insane. To be honest, like my behavior, where I was at mentally, I mean, I was pacing rooms, gone, and I was intoxicated 24/7, and I mean, just a nightmare for like my parents to be around. They welcome me into their home. Hey, cool, we'll get you in here, we'll get you set up and everything like that. We don't mind, and I'm just running amok like over Newport Richie, and basically that took me the messages I was sending my parents were like incoherent. Like it was not just incoherent, but like the point of them was like completely baffling. So my dad's like, I got a phone number for you to call, and that was CRC Baycare. So I voluntarily admitted myself for about 4.5 months, and I voluntarily left. But it was great because when I was there, I got to meet a lot of people. Like I was exposed to the fellowships. I was exposed to Jeremy. I was exposed to Chris. I was exposed to these people coming in, Tommy, and talking about this thing that I'm like, you know what? All this stuff about like emotional regulation and healthy behavior, healthy thinking, and trauma and stuff like this is all good, but this is what's going to save my life. I knew that from the start. I had to get closer to this fellowship because in there I didn't fully accept that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life became unmanageable at all. I mean, I wanted to stop, drinking, and I wanted to stop doing drugs, sure. But I didn't realize how powerless I was over this stuff, and how unmanageable things got. So once I decided to pick a sponsor and start working the steps, my sponsor took me through these steps and really hammered home in my head that like, listen, man, like you're gonna die, like if you keep doing this. And I had a very kind gentleman at Detox, medical professional, explain to me for about an hour how exactly I was going to die from a medical standpoint. And I was like, all right. So I should probably stop doing this. But no, I mean, from the step work standpoint, from the spiritual standpoint, my sponsor was very, very clear and very concise about like how my life, like essentially bringing me to the idea that my life was absolutely out of control, that things have become unmanageable. And then it took me to the second step, step 2, which was a little bit interesting for me. So came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. That's kind of an interesting one for me because like I've never been this religious person, really. Like I've never been this spiritual person. I mean, I believed in like I knew something was kind of out there, but you could call me agnostic for sure. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it looked like. And I didn't know how to communicate with it or anything like that. And I remember originally like because I feel like my sponsor kind of knew that was the case and was like, listen, like, I've been sober for almost 3 years, and that's like wild. And he's like, so if you can believe in the thing that I've got, and if you can believe in the thing that we're tapping into in these rooms, the spiritual thing, then that's good enough for now. And I'll tell you what, like, I didn't really believe much at that point, but I believed in him. And I believed in this stuff that we're doing here in these rooms. So that was kind of my story in a nutshell. And I wanted to read a little bit from To the Agnostics and kind of chat about some things that I found interesting in there. So, whoa. All right. So the first thing I'm going to read is on page 44 at the bottom, the last paragraph. So, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So, like, I'm the kind of guy coming into this deal that just believes that, like, if I could just be a better person, you know, then these things are just going to fix themselves. Like, if I could just will this thing, and, like, if I could just say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to drink and I'm not going to do drugs. Like, I mentally understand this, you know, that this is where this gets me. I'm the type of person that believed that was sufficient, but I'm setting myself up for disaster. One, because I'm doing it myself. And two, I can't intellectualize my way out of this thing. So, like, I can neither intellectualize my way out, nor can I come up with a moral psychology sufficient to stop this phenomenon of craving. Can't do it. I mean, with other things, like if I want to be a better person in other regards and stuff, then sure, maybe moral psychology has an answer for me there. But moral psychology doesn't really have an answer for me as it pertains to being an alcoholic. So right after that, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? So, yeah, like, I really, like, leaning back to kind of what I was talking about with my sponsor of kind of tapping into the power in these rooms. I remember, like, my first couple meetings, and I'm like, I feel something, like, in these meetings, and I can't put my finger on it again, like, but it's very peaceful and it's very soothing to my soul. Like, when I come into these rooms and I'm by other alcoholics that are going through the same thing, the other addicts that are going through the same thing that I'm going through, there is something, like, very, very peaceful about that to me, and there's a connectedness to that. I can go up to people in fellowship and share some of my experience and be like, hey, this is how I'm batshit crazy. And they can be like, oh, cool, this is how I am. But through their experience, like, I've learned to not feel so alone. I've always felt this kind of, like, I'm not going to call it abandonment, but I'm going to call it this isolation, this loneliness throughout my entire life. And when I get into these rooms, I don't feel that anymore. I feel connected. And also, I get to talk to a bunch of people that kind of get to tell me a little bit more on how they found their higher power. So I'm forever grateful for both the 12 steps of AA and the fellowships for helping guide me there. The next thing I would like to read is on page 46. It says, yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as you were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. And, like, that's me. Like, coming into this deal is, like, essentially I'm feeling these things. I'm not sure how to define it, but I know it's there. And I get flickers of these things. I get flickers of this kind of spiritual feeling where I can feel like I'm connected to my higher power. By the way, let me just say, like, I love that we use higher power in these rooms, because that really, like, makes our singularity of purpose, like, straight. Like, I love, like, if all of a sudden we were talking about, like, all right, like, this is what you have to believe in and whatever, I'd be like, all right, this is a cult. But, like, I love the fact that we use higher power, because that still allows me and you and me and you and me and you to have these same conversations, and we may have different higher powers, but we can still have that same conversation. Like on kind of an off note, there's a really interesting philosophy that I heard of this guy talking about spirituality, and was like, yeah, we've actually all created a different God, because we all think of something even slightly similar, even slightly differently. Therefore, we have created all of our own versions of God. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But the next paragraph I'm going to read is, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we empathetically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So that's the huge word in there, is willing. Having a willingness to believe that there's a power greater than yourself. So like for me, the spiritual part of my program of working these 12 steps, which I have worked, like this kind of developed almost like in the slowest, I would say. This thing was kind of riding in the background, and it started kind of going slowly, and then it started picking up kind of towards the end there. And a lot of that, I think, was based on my willingness, because I have a different definition of willingness than I had when I came into this deal. Like I was kind of sitting there, and I would get, again, these kind of flickers of spirituality, but like with Bill kind of getting that white light, like smack, like I never got that. Mine was just more of a kind of a gradual increase, but what I do, or what I can tell you now, is that these moments are much more closely stitched together, and they're much more consistent. But if we are just willing to receive a spiritual experience, that's the only thing like that we need to do. That's the only thing I need to do, is be willing. So on 48, faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. So when I kind of told my story, this was just kind of this cohesive story, but there were a couple hiccups through there. So when I left CRC, I'm thinking like, okay, I just got to go to meetings, right? Wrong. Like I relapsed within 2 to 3 weeks, and I relapsed. It was a kind of a day thing, and this is when I actually kind of like freaked out and got a sponsor and started working these steps, because I'm like, all right, at that point I was sold that Rehab Enough was not sufficient to help me with alcoholism and drug addiction. So I got a sponsor, and we started working steps. Now I wish that I can tell you that was a smooth journey, and it wasn't. Around after step 7, I also relapsed. And then I went into detox, and I started distancing myself from everyone for like 2 weeks. I started not talking to people that I normally talk to every day. My sober sports, I stopped calling my sponsor. And I was back in Baker detox, wondering what the hell happened. So thankfully, I called people close to me, and I called my sponsor. I'm like, hey, will you still go through these steps with me? I need this stuff, like I'm going to die. And thankfully, my sponsor continued to work with me. Thankfully, people at the Hope Shot helped out. They showed up in a really big way. And thankfully, like coming back to these rooms, because I'm feeling like guilt and shame, I'm feeling embarrassment and all this stuff, and everyone welcomed me back. Glad to see you. Glad you're back in the rooms. And then I started realizing that it was my ego that had that embarrassment. It was my ego that had that guilt and shame. But I was pummeled to a point, even physically, I was pummeled to a point where they were like, listen, you're going to be brain dead. If you're going to have Alzheimer's, you're going to have Parkinson's, this is how you're going to go. And that's not, what the life that I wanted for myself. And I don't think that's the life that my higher power wanted for me either. So at that point, we went through and we reworked some steps, and got to the point where we left off and everything. But I mean, I had to get absolutely pummeled to like be finally ask my higher power, like, you got anything for me here, man? Because like I'm the most willing I've ever been in my lifetime, and like this is it. Like we're in do or die time right now, you know? And I don't think it's any sort of coincidence that my higher power brought my sponsor back to me, brought the Hope Shot back to me, that had me, you know, end up in a sober living, that I ended up having the resources, you know, like that I had. That's not, to me, coincidence at all. But I've come to not believe in coincidence really anymore, the further that I do this deal. A little bit further down it says, everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. I'm big on science, and I'm a really like analytical type of guy. And for me, like, it's really easy for me to believe in the water bottle. You know, like it's really easy for me to believe in the book. It's a bigger leap for me to believe in a higher power. There, I actually, you know, have to have faith, which I haven't had much faith in anything my entire life because, you know, like things just always kind of never worked out the way that I wanted them to. So, I mean, to come to this conclusion that I need a higher power in my life, that's the missing piece, because my will and my power alone will not get me through this thing, was a big leap of faith. But I chose to take that leap of faith because, frankly, I've tried everything that I could ever try to stop doing this thing, and it was insufficient to the full extent of the word. So when I say God or higher power, I'm kind of using them interchangeably, but yeah, I was broken at that point, and I was like, God, like whatever you want me to do, I'll do to get out of this situation. You know, and things just started happening. Let's see what else I got. So at the beginning of page 50, instead we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. I used to... So some of my character defects, like I am a gossiper. I will condemn people for things that I do myself. I will chastise people for things that I believe they've done wrong. Right? Like stupid. So like I for a long time had my face up to a tree and I was missing the whole forest. And with like the same thing with spirituality, I would also kind of like thumb my nose at God, and I'd be like, "Why aren't you doing these things for me?" Like all these times that I got there, that I made it to the place that I was going, and I was just about to take it to the next level. Something like happened, and I'm like, "Why would you let that happen?" And I'm like you're kind of a shitty God, to be honest, and. But again, my face was just planted on the singular tree, and I was missing the whole thing. The last thing that I'll kind of share was a little bit of bedevilment. Let's see here. All right. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. Gosh, like going through that list, it's like it's like Neo from the Matrix, like bullets are coming at me, like going through that list of things. I have while I'm in this alcoholic state, while I'm in this drug addict state, I can't be of help to myself. I can't be of service to myself, and I can't be of service to anyone else if I can't be of service to myself. And through all those things, the relationships, the employment, the this, the that, I was missing my higher power in all those things. I was acting out of self-interest. And self-interest seemed to always land myself in detox. And I couldn't figure out why. But, with this power greater than myself to restore me to sanity, like I was saying, like, I can't tell you how insane I was. But what I also can tell you is that the only thing that could have pulled me from that state is a power greater than myself. I don't even think any human power could have restored me to sanity. To be honest with you, that was one of the wildest experiences I've gone through in my life. But, the more that I am open to the will of my higher power and enacting that will through my own will, then the closer I seem to get to this thing. The more sane I seem to get. Now, I'm not claiming that I'll be a sane individual ever. I am me in my entirety. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. But I mean, when I start tackling these problems, when I start checking my motives from the relationship angle, from the job angle, from am I helping someone with the correct motives, then good things really start to happen. And this, nowadays, when I pray, when I'm at meetings, when I'm working with my sponsor, when I'm working with my sponsees, just in general, I feel genuine joy. And that's a really elusive feeling that I haven't felt in a long time. So I appreciate everyone for being here, and I hope we can have a good discussion about this stuff.